Welcome to Aston Means Business. I'm Steve Dyson, the journalist who's been presenting this regular podcast for Aston Business School. With the COVID-19 pandemic threatening to shut down the economy, we're working with the Aston Centre for Growth to turn this podcast's attention towards how small businesses, known as SMEs, are coping. This special series is called Aston Means Business, SMEs dealing with COVID-19. In each episode, we'll be talking to businesses who are taking part or who have previously taken part in Aston Centre for Growth's programmes. We'll provide a voice for them to discuss their challenges, share their experiences, and explain how they are dealing with the crisis. We'll also be interviewing some of Aston Business School's top academics and other experts, getting their valuable insight, analysis, and advice for SMEs. The first episode will feature Professor Mark Hart, one of the UK's top experts on SMEs research and entrepreneurship. We'll also be joined by Joe Fern. He's the Managing Director of CircusMASH, a team-building entertainment and fitness company. And we'll be speaking to Lee Hopley, a UK industry economist who works on issues relating to business resilience and SME finance. Just so everyone knows, we're conforming, of course, to government guidelines. So we're doing everything for this podcast remotely, using various bits of new software. And if necessary, if people are more remote, we're recording their interviews through the telephone wire, the old-fashioned way. So bear with us on that. Joining me on the line now is Professor Mark Hart. He's the leading voice at both Aston Centre for Growth and the National Enterprise Research Centre, known as the ERC. Hello to you, Mark.
Hi there, Steve. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you too. First of all, Mark, what's your overall view on how COVID-19 is impacting small businesses?
Well, I need to be careful about my language here, Steve, but I think it's an absolute disaster for the economy. We've seen that come through in the last few days about some of the metrics we follow, the PMI Purchaser Manager Index, it's fallen through the floor. It's worse than it was in the Great Recession over a decade ago. So it's bad for the economy. The small business sector, micro businesses, self-employed, freelancers, they're the backbone of the economy. A lot of the big companies can't operate without these small businesses and their supply chain. So look, the economy's taking a hit, and it's an absolute disaster for small businesses. The revenues have dried up overnight, and that's really quite frightening for a lot of people. Business leaders are looking at their, back end of 2019, Steve. We were still in a period of uncertainty, but a lot of the small business leaders I work with, they still were optimistic. They were clear about their business model. They knew where they were going in 2020. And then all of a sudden, as we come to the end of Q1 on 2020, it's all fallen apart. So we are in dire straits with respect to what we can do for our small businesses. So we need to take this seriously, because we can't afford, as an economy, as a society, to let small businesses just disappear as a result of this crisis.
Yeah, and thinking about that, Mark, while many parts of the economy are either shutting down completely or seeing a huge downturn, others, as you say, need to keep things going. They need to keep their revenues going, need to keep their staff engaged. How can SMEs try to seize this opportunity? And I say the word opportunity carefully. I don't want to be trite about that. But how can they turn themselves to different things?
Well, let me preface my response to that question, which is really very pertinent to our listeners, actually. When we go back to previous recessions, what do businesses do? We've done a lot of research on this in the ERC back into the early 90s, the dot-com boom and bust, and obviously the Great Recession. And what we find is that businesses who actually look at their business model, innovate it, think about it, and keep close to what their customers want. In other words, why were your customers coming to you in the first place? So it's not about suddenly finding new customers. It's actually working with your customers perhaps in a different way. So, the opportunity, and again, you're right, Steve, it sounds like a very strange word to use in the current context, but I do believe that if businesses and business leaders keep close to their customers, have conversations, find out, we have a relationship, we get it, that you perhaps have cancelled your orders or cancelled an event or something like that, but how can we work with you differently? Is there anything we can do to actually tweak our model or flip it over 180 degrees and do something completely different with you? So I I think there are opportunities out there. It doesn't mean to say that, I doom and gloom comment at the beginning, doesn't mean to say that every business will disappear within the next month. Many are under threat, clearly, but we need to be encouraging and assisting, and that's what we do at Aston. We will work with the businesses in our networks to actually help them think through the business model. Who are their suppliers? Who are their customers? What can they do to keep trading? So it's not, my advice is don't go out thinking about, who are my new customers? Where do I start? Think about your existing customers. Drop them an email. Get them on whatever media we're using working at home, and just talk to them and see if we can actually do something with your existing customers in a different way to try and get some revenue.
I get you. No, that sounds very good advice indeed. And that's the SMEs themselves, of course. Now, the government's announced various financial assistance, and we're going to talk to your colleague and finance expert, Lee Hopley, later on about the detail of that. But in summary, Mark, is the government doing enough to help SMEs?
Look, this is the package that has been announced in 3 bids. We've had 3 budgets since the 11th of March. The money is there. The question is, how do we get it to businesses quickly and efficiently? So there's no question about the supply of money. The question is how mechanisms to draw it down to keep these businesses going. So furloughing workers, 80% of salary announced last Friday was brilliant. Packages that were announced with respect to the loans, business interruption loan funds that were handled through Business Bank and all of their key partners on the high street, so to speak. The key for me, though, is urgency. And I'm not so sure that this is the worry I've got, that the government is sort of announcing things as a result of pressure. So the whole business about self-employed, for example, has come through huge pressure. We're in a crisis. The money's being released. We need to get the mechanisms right. And it's our job, from a business school perspective, supporting our small business to make sure they know how to access it. My worry is that it's still tied up in a lot of bureaucracy. How are the banks reacting? So they say, look, the government will underwrite the loans. Yeah, but, what's the bureaucratic hoops people have to go through? We're hearing stories about, banks go back a year checking up on, were you solvent, in the last quarter of 2019? If you weren't, then maybe you're not going to get this loan. That's a black mark. That's not what we should be doing. The banks need to get real. Other things about the appetite for debt. Businesses don't want debt. They want cash to be solvent. Because if, getting debt means there's issues there about what's on your balance sheet. And that's really quite important for small businesses. And also, I go back to the Great Recession. We know, because we tracked this since 2011 through the Small SME Finance Monitor, the appetite for external finance is not great. And why? Because they remember what the banks did. They pulled overdrafts, they pulled loans. So there's a bit of a perception issue here. So loans are great, cash is better.
So in terms of the simplicity is what you're talking about, I think, in terms of the access and the making it easier for businesses. So with that in mind, in a sentence, what else is needed from the government?
Clear messaging in terms of the current lockdown, Steve, with respect to what's essential, what's not. This is a complete nightmare in terms of small businesses deciding, well, are we or are we not? Off licenses are closed in Northern Ireland. Off licenses are trading as normal in England. So there's confusion. We need simplicity, clear guidance, and clear mechanisms to get cash into the hands of the self-employed and small businesses.
No, excellent advice. That's good, and I hope that someone from the government is listening to this podcast today. One last question, Mark, and I know you've covered quite a lot in what you've told us, but for small business owners listening, seeking advice and trying to deal with the crisis, what are your top tips? What do you want to leave them with?
Well, solvency is what's going to keep you trading when this crisis is over. So keep close to your customers and suppliers. Don't hide away. Keep close to your bank in terms of whatever facilities you need. I've made my point about the loan and debt, but I think in terms of overdraft facilities, keep an eye on all of that. Think about your business model, as I said earlier, about is there any tweaks you can do to keep your customers served in a slightly different way, perhaps to keep some revenue coming into the business. Keep close to probably guess I'm going to say this, to the range of business support that us as a university, and particularly a business school, the Aston Centre for Growth, it was set up to help small businesses, primarily in Birmingham and the Midlands, but we also work nationally. Keep close to those who understand your issues, who can give you that one-to-one bespoke advice. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You can't do it on your own, and certainly Aston Business School is here to help.
Professor Mark Hart, many thanks for joining us. I know we'll be hearing more from you soon on future podcasts on this series. Many thanks.
Thanks very much, Steve.
I want to talk to a business leader next, and joining me on the line is Joe Fern. He's the Managing Director of CircusMASH. That's a team-building, entertainment and fitness company. Hello to you, Joe.
Hello, Steve.
Joe, tell us a bit more about CircusMASH, things like where you're based and what do you do?
Okay, so CircusMASH, we're based in King's Heath, first of all. Our base is in King's Heath, but we work all over the region. And we do 4 things. So we teach social circus, which is teaching people circus for fitness and other different reasons, recreation really. We create shows. We do outreach to schools, and then we do professional development for artists and emerging artists, all within circus.
Wow, it sounds quite a feat that you do there. I mean, have you got people who used to be in the circus? Have you been in the circus?
Yeah, well, this is the background for me. Like, so I, at 18, I grew up in Birmingham, and circus was always a love of mine. So that was my chosen career path. So for a long time, I did touring circus after I went to circus school, and then when I decided to come back to Birmingham, which is I did in 2011, then I started CircusMASH because there wasn't anything here.
And just to talk to you just very quickly about CircusMASH as a business. What's the business structure and how many staff do you have?
So there is a management team of 5 people. Everybody started here as a student and has grown into the roles as the business has grown. So there's a management team of 5. That includes myself as the director. There's a second director also that runs the corporate side of things. And then there's a team of 20 circus practitioners, performers, that most of them are part-time. But some of them, do 10 hours worth of classes a week, and some of them are just called upon on a project basis.
I get you. And how long have you been going, and what's the sort of estimate of your annual turnover?
So we've been going since 2011. And our turnover predicted this year, well, with the current situation, I'm not sure, but we're about 180,000.
So it's a sizable business. And I suppose the current situation is what I want to bring you on to next. How is COVID-19 affecting your operations?
Well, to be honest, the whole operation's closed down, the old operation, I suppose. So all of our summer's really busy for us. So all of our festivals and our corporate clients and all of the stuff that we do over the summer, that's all been stopped now. So that's all been pulled or put on pause. And also the school, the academy, where we teach up to 200 people a week, that's had to close down. So right now it's a question of how we're, I guess, adapting to that. So to create a new operation, I suppose. So yeah, it's really affected us.
And in terms of just the effect to start with, I'll come on to how you're adapting in a moment. But just the effects, are you having to lay people off, put them on short time working? How are you coping with the cash flows?
Good question. It's really early to tell, to be honest. What I can say is that the support that we have from a community and staff is absolutely amazing. So everybody's pulled together, and everyone's in the same boat. We're all in the same boat, but everybody wants to keep CircusMASH going, and everybody wants to see CircusMASH through these times. So the staff are like, we've had to say to them, like, there is no money right now. Everything's cut, but we want to keep this dream alive, and everybody's pulled together to keep us going. So actually, it's really bonded us as a team. So as I say, it's too early to tell in terms of cash flow. I know there's a lot of holes right now. And I think the next couple of weeks we'll figure out, at what point those will have a bigger effect.
I'll come on to the finance in a moment then, because there's various finance assistants around, of course, so we'll discuss that. But before I do, how are you trying to adapt and keep trading during the pandemic?
A lot of our stuff's gone online. We want to ensure we keep in front of our community. So we've transferred a lot of our classes onto online digital systems where we're doing them from home in people's houses, which is the biggest one, really. And we're exploring how we do that and how we adapt. You know, circus is very physical and it's about connecting with people in the face. So we've had to really adapt how we can use circus when we're not in front of someone. So it's the biggest answer to that question is if we've gone to the online space.
Which is pretty nifty, really, because everyone's at home and they need something to do, don't they?
Absolutely. It's been a time where we've been able to, like, in the morning, if we say we're going to do a class, we can put it out there and people are in that class overnight. And that doesn't happen in everyday world because, you know, not everybody's there sitting waiting for something to happen by looking at their computer. So it really worked for us so far.
And in terms of it working, I know that there's lots of things you were going to do which aren't happening. And so therefore you're missing some of your revenues. But are you actually in this particular area of online videos and training and circus feats, etc., are you actually seeing an increase there and bringing some new revenues in?
I definitely see an opportunity to increase. I think in the beginning it was a very scary time and it was like, what do we do? What do we do? And the whole circus community seemed to be going online. When I did Aston Growth Programme, what I didn't realise until now was what that did for all the little seeds that have been planted for the last 2 years. All of us have somehow connected together during this time. Those little projects that were happening, and a lot of it was digital stuff. A lot of it was kind of online. How do we reach people in new ways? All of a sudden, this has happened, and we've had to completely adapt to change direction. But those seeds are in place. So I don't know what's going to happen from that, but I definitely see the opportunity. I think it's a bit too early to tell.
How brilliant that you've got some of those ideas from your programme at Aston Centre for Growth.
And I'll tell you what, it was absolutely down to them because, I mean, I didn't know, you know, a lot of words, you know, that were used in business, let alone, you know, like how to run an operation from that perspective. But I'll tell you what, that is what has helped us through this and is helping us through this and will help us through this.
Brilliant. Now, just a wider thought. Obviously, you're in the community yourself. You're in King's Heath, Birmingham. You've got a wider network of people. What are you seeing in the wider economy in the business sector? How do you think people are coping out there as businesses?
I think this is a really difficult time, and I think businesses are really struggling and businesses are grasping to kind of see how they survive. And I think in times like that, it really kind of adds a lot of pressure to us. And it's, I think it's a difficult time, and I think it's so early, and everyone right at this point is like, how do I get through the next day? How do I? And I think it's having a massive impact on businesses, but also kind of the freelancers that are their own business. And for us, freelancers and self-employed people that work in entertainment, like, have got a really, really like that. Because, you know, their income comes from the businesses, and as the businesses are struggling, like, they've got nothing, and it's really hard to hear stories I'm hearing.
I can see that. That sounds harsh. Just a word on the wider efforts that are being made by the UK at the moment in terms of trying to help businesses. I mean, it's unprecedented, but there's been some amazing facts stated by the government. You know, no VAT to be paid for the moment, business rates, holiday, people can have sick pay for 2 weeks. There's various other things about grants and loans and potentially paying up to 80% of people's wages. Have you got your head around all that, or is it too complicated, or is it welcome? Where are you with all that?
I've been worried a lot about that. And just other things that we've got coming up. My first thought was like, oh no, how are we going to survive? We are going to collapse. But then as the days have gone on, I've been really surprised at the amount of support that's out there to allow us to survive as CircusMASH through this time. And all of these little things are really kind of helping to ease the pressure on our mind so we can figure out how we can adapt to these situations. So from what I can see that's being done for business, or for us, you know, I think it's going to really help us.
And is it easy to access, or are you still working that out with your accountants and stuff?
I have no idea. I think I'm so focused right now on what we're actually doing, and I think those are the days that are going to come. I've got a list of things that I need to do, and Thursday's a finance business day, and I've got a really supportive team around me, and especially the other director who's really working on the finance stuff. So I think, that's to come, Steve.
I understand. And whilst you're waiting for that to come, Joe, is there anything else that you think is needed? There's a lot going on. There's a lot of businesses struggling. As you said yourself, you think that lots of what's to come is good. But is there anything else needed in your mind as a local business owner?
Absolutely. I think there's love, unity, and a conversation around mental health for a lot of people, for a lot of individuals, for a lot of business owners. There's so much pressure going on right now, and I think, I think, especially within the community I live, which is generally Kings Heath, and I do all my work. I think that I can't quite bring my words to it. What we've done at CircusMASH is we've partnered with another local group called Class Act Theatrics to create B14. And B14 is there to kind of help people through this crisis and to be inspired and to be creative and to remember all of those little things that the news aren't telling us, on an individual level, but hopefully up to a business level as well, like to get those conversations started. And I think what has been really inspirational is people getting together online and actually helping each other through. And I think there's more of that needed. And I think that's where that space, that opportunity that's opening up for us to kind of help people with that.
Joe, that sounds fantastic. Joe Fern of CircusMASH, many thanks for joining us on the podcast today. And let me wish you the very best of wishes for your endeavours.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Steve.
Now let's turn to our next guest. I want to introduce Lee Hopley. She's an economist who works on issues relating to business resilience and SME finance. Hello to you, Lee.
Good afternoon, Steve.
Lee, for those not sure, can you give us a summary of the government's financial offer to businesses to keep them going during the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think businesses would be forgiven for not keeping track of everything that government has announced over the last week. There's been a series of statements from the Chancellor, and I think these have been primarily targeted towards helping some businesses with their fixed costs and also managing cash flow. So on the tax side, very quickly, we've had commitments around deferral of some key tax payments for a 3-month period. So that's VAT for businesses and also income tax for the self-employed. We also have a reignition of HMRC's time to pay scheme. So if you need to contact HMRC to create some headroom, then that's an option that's open to business as well. On the fixed cost side, I think there's kind of two primary interventions here. One is on the key element that's already been mentioned on the employee wage costs. So we've got the job retention scheme where the government will cover up to 80% of the salary of furloughed workers. And we also have some significant movements on business rates as well. So these aren't across the board. It very much depends on what your rateable value is or if you're in a particular sector. But there are some holidays for 12 months for some business rates players. In addition, we've also got some more direct support, so grant payments for smaller companies and those in the hospitality sector, for example. And again, as already been mentioned, quite a substantial loan guarantee scheme, which is up and running as of the 23rd of March.
There's quite an enormous amount of stuff coming from the government. Is it enough? Is it too complex? What else is needed? What can you tell us on that, Lee?
I don't think anyone can make a judgment at this point of whether it's going to be enough. I mean, there is a key element which does appear to be missing, which a lot of business organisations and also MPs have raised, and that is support for the self-employed. So perhaps not so relevant for manufacturing, but I think if there has been one gap thus far, it is on support for self-employed sector. Is it complicated? I think inevitably there's got to be an aspect of complexity here. I mean, this is an unprecedented intervention from the government in support of small businesses, their cash flow, their business rates, their tax payments, and their employees. There's a huge fiscal commitment here, and I think inevitably that is going to come with a degree of complexity. I think what's going to be really important now is making sure that there's really good advice out there, really good signposting, and the application process, whether that's through HMRC or via the banks, is as bureaucracy light as it can possibly be.
I get that, and I want to ask you about that in more detail, really, because people listening, who do they go to next? Where do they turn to? Is it their accountant? Is it someone new? Is it the government? Is it local government? Where do they go to get the best advice? Is it the university? What happens next?
To get more detail on the individual schemes, I'd probably start at gov.uk because that sets out how these schemes will work, the stage of implementation that they're at, essentially. And there is actually some quite helpful signposting on the government's own website. Looking for more information about the loan, the government-backed loan scheme, the British Business Bank should be the first port of call for information about participating banks. And I think we might find that this is more expansive than the Enterprise Finance Guarantee Scheme. So hopefully that will allay some concerns there. In terms of getting advice and support about where to go next, I mean, some of the key people will clearly be existing networks that businesses are tapped into. So that's probably going to be people like your accountants. Also, we've got a network of growth hubs across the country, which you really need to be geared up to be providing good quality advice online about these schemes, local participants, and how to access them. And I think in some cases, particularly around things like business rates, there won't be any action required of business at all. So that will all be done automatically by local authorities. So not all of these schemes will actually require direct access from individual businesses. So as I said, that gov.uk website is actually probably a helpful first port of call for many companies.
And just one more question for you, Lee. The government is effectively freezing the economy while they try to deal with the COVID-19. And they're, of course, hoping that everything can kick back into action once it's over. But no one knows whether that's weeks, months, or even up to a year. How practical is what they're doing? And how do you think that manufacturing companies can cope? How resilient are they?
I think whether it's practical or not has been overtaken by the fact that this isn't optional for the government. I mean, this is absolutely the steps that had to be taken. In terms of ramping back up again, I think that's going to mean different things for different sectors. I think for manufacturing, probably one of the most important aspects of the government interventions today is around retention of key workers. That is always the most important thing for industry coming out of a crisis. There's already skills challenges, across the country in many manufacturing sectors. Without the ability to try and hold on or retain some of those workers through this period, ramping up again is going to be extremely difficult. So I think that should be helpful. There's some questions about investment through this period. We know that that's been an aspect of the economy and manufacturing over the last couple of years, partly because we've had Brexit-related uncertainty that's been held back. And I think, if we see another year where companies aren't investing in new technologies, clearly that's going to make that bounce back again slightly more challenging. I think the final aspect really to consider is that the UK is an open economy, and manufacturing in particular is very international. Not all economies are going to bounce back at the same time. So understanding your supply chains and your customers and where they are in terms of this recovery journey, I think is going to be really critical for manufacturing, not just in terms of their overseas customers or suppliers, but also how integrated other parts of their UK supply chain are into those global value networks.
Lee, I said last question, but I'm going to ask you one more. In a nutshell, what should SMEs do next?
There's not going to be one unique answer to that. I mean, clearly, the primary thing on SMEs' minds is likely to be, the health and well-being of their employees. And that is absolutely critical at the moment. Keeping in touch with them, making sure they understand, good communication about what is happening within the business is going to be really important. And just making sure that they're tapping into the best advice to get through this period. They're not on their own. There's going to be lots of other businesses like them tapping into your peer networks and the expertise that you can is going to be crucial in helping businesses try and survive through this period of unprecedented uncertainty and challenge.
Many thanks for joining us, Lee Hopley. Lee works here at Aston for the National Enterprise Research Centre, and I know many owners and staff of SMEs listening will have found your insight and advice very useful. And that wraps up this first podcast in our special series. We'll be back in the next few days with more case studies of how businesses are coping, and with more crucial analysis and advice from academics and experts here at Aston. Aston means business. SMEs dealing with COVID-19. Thanks for listening.